this incredible aunt of mine who was a very famous opera singer in England. And for my 8th birthday, she's given me a 35mm hand-cranked film projector. And I used to close the windows and get all the friends in the building and screen this unimportant piece of film, which she gave me. But it was 35mm. It wasn't 16 or 8, it was 35. Even during communism, there were certain, English movies were forbidden in Hungary, English-speaking movies. Only communist propaganda movies or movies with Paul Robeson singing Old Man River, because they thought he was a communist, which he wasn't, but he was black. And there were no black people in Hungary at all. And I remember he came to perform in Budapest and I went to his concert, and again at a very early age. So it was all this obsession about beginning about filming and America and England and also seeing Laurence Olivier's Hamlet in 1948. I still see myself sitting in the seat of that cinema. And I was 11 years old. And it made a tremendous impression on me. Everything was very much connected with England for me because of this aunt of mine. So when the revolution came, I said to this friend of mine, this actor friend of mine, to Peter, he said, look, I don't know about you, but I'm going to try to escape tomorrow. And the 2 of us, 3 of us, another friend, we left. And by some miracle, complicated, but we got out of Hungary by midnight that evening. And there started my life in the West, which was a miracle, because had I stayed in Hungary, I don't know what would have happened, because I wasn't allowed to go to school. Because my father was imprisoned by the Russians for being an American spy, which he wasn't, and they took everything away from us. And so I had to get out of there. And the only thing I could do is learn photography, which was a great, great kind of incredibly important side to my craft of being a director, because that's where my vision opened. That's all I wanted to do ever since my aunt gave me that 35mm projector. I wish I still would have it, but of course I left it behind in Hungary because you couldn't bring anything, just what you had on. I got to London in 1956, and my English was really kind of very questionable. Ridiculous, And when I got my first job as an apprentice at the Associated British Picture Corporation, or AB Pathé, which was a newsreel company, and then gradually over a period of 3 years, I moved through every department, from cleaning the camera maintenance room and learning about every camera which existed and how to load them and feed them, whether were Chemiflex, Ariflex, IMO, Mitchell, whatever. Meanwhile, there was a commercial studio nearby where they were making commercials. So I turned up there, and I then realized, that, they made a film at Associated Pathé, which I then become a clapper boy on it, a number boy. And really that was the first time legitimately I was on a film or a film crew. And I still got the photograph of me standing there with the number boy. And that was, I think, in 1959. And I then realized that the studios are really not in London. This was a documentary section of this huge company, Associated British Picture Corporation, which was run by somebody called C.J. Latta, L-E-T-T-A, who was a managing director of that company, because Warner Brothers owned 45% of ABPC. And so he again become like this God-sent mentor of mine. And he got me this first job. And he told me, he said, it's going to be difficult because we've got to get you into the ACTT, which was the British Film Union. And it's going to take a few days, a few weeks. And anyhow, I did all that. And so I went to him and I wrote to him that I really would love to be transferred to the ABPC studios at Elstree. And within a week, I was at Elstree Studios and I started as the third assistant director. And then I had the fortune of working on a television series there called International Detectives. And then when that finished, then I went on to, miraculously, on Fred Zinnemann's The Sundowners, and Carol Reed was doing a film which Sophia Loren was in it at the studio. And so that kind of continued this one project to the other. But then very quickly, when I became an assistant director there, I decided to end my kind of contract and become a freelance, which was called those days, you know, assistant director. And then I went on at MGM Studios in Boreham Wood, onto Danger Man. And I met David Tomlin, who was the first assistant director, who was one of the legendary first ADs in England. So bit by bit, like that, you know, and then I went from that thing to another thing, and then a first assistant, second assistant, first assistant, and I declared myself a first assistant. And then I went on to various movies. Among one of them was this incredible film directed by, which was her only movie, by Joan Littlewood, who was a legendary stage director in the East End of London, revitalizing working class theater. And so my experience just grew more and more and more. And I learned a tremendous amount from Joan. And she very graciously let me in. And because she never done a movie before. And I, on the first day of shooting, everything was set up and the cameras were rolling. And I'm turning around looking for Joan to hear her say action. Very corny, but that's what it is. Action, you know, and there was no Joan. I said, where is Joan? And he said, oh, she's gone down the pub. By some miracle again. I mean, there were several miracles which happened in my life or career. I went under contract to Universal Studios, and I was working in London for VIPs as a second assistant director, which was a film with Elizabeth Taylor, Orson Welles, Richard Burton, Louis Jourdan, Maggie Smith. I think it was, darling, Maggie Smith's first movie. And I got this offer to go to Hollywood to learn about American television and go there for 6 months and then be sent back, but with a 7-year contract with yearly options. And when I got to LA, you know, very quickly that project fell through. And they wanted to send me back to England, and I said, we pay you for the year and we'll let you know what happens next year. And if you pick up your auction, you come back to Hollywood. And I said, you don't understand, I can't go back to London. And they said, why? I said, because Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor, and Anthony Asquith, and the groom threw a party for the kid. He got his big break. He's going to Hollywood to start to direct. I can't go back 2 weeks later saying I'm back again, you know? And I quit VIP. So they said, okay. So they kept me, and I stayed for 2-3 years at Universal, which was a monumentally important part of my experience about television, because they had like 30 television shows at the time. And I mean, I was there when they were shooting the pilot of The Monsters, which became the Addams Family. And then I worked on an incredible series called Arrest and Trial, which was about Chuck Connors and Ben Gazzara. And the first part was the arrest, the second, the trial. And doing it with watching it, not directing, but just being part of the producer's team, of keeping an eye of what's going on the set. But I managed to work with Louis Milestone and all kinds of wonderful, legendary directors who came back to do television, you know. So this mystique about television completely vanished in my mind. And then when you could get a movie made, you went to do movie. So that, and then I came back to England, and then we were at Pinewood Studio doing a series called Court Martial with Peter Graves and Brett Dillman, again for a year and a half, 2 years for Universal. And after that is when I found the Book of Negatives. And when Sid Sheinberg, who was the head of the Universal Studio, called up, and he said, Peter, we want to pick up your next year options to come back to LA after you finishing at Pinewood. I said, look, Sidney, I found this incredible book, and I got this then unknown British actress called Glenda Jackson. That's what's going to be my first movie. And I left and I broke the contract and never came back officially. Day in the Death of Joe Egg, which was a black comedy, but I did it because of the very, very dark side of the film, that very dark humor, you know. And so that's a comedy. Then Ruling Class was a comedy. And then I think my next film after that was Peter Sellers' Ghost in the Noonday Sun, which was a comedy, which turned out to be a disaster, you know, unfortunately. But I also started doing television at the same time after Ruling Class. And people said to me, I said, you're crazy, you've done this great movie. You're doing television, and that television, those days, it was not the thing to do in England, was to go from television into movies, you know. But then I wanted to do it because I wanted to work with other actors and new actors and to learn and meet new people, you know, and I'm very glad I did, you know, the Saint and all kinds of things, you know. With Roger Moore and Tony Curtis, and I wouldn't have known them. And it always helps to change and you meet new people. And so it's nonsense. And now it's proven itself that in a way television has become more important than films, you know. But it doesn't matter. Most important thing is to work, is to keep on working and keep practicing your craft. And you know, because we don't, I mean, sometimes, you know, with David Lean, you know, sometimes he went on for 10 years not making a movie, but it means it doesn't not make him. He's, you know, the same thing happened to me too. There was big breaks between my films, and you go very popular and unpopular, and people like you and don't like you, and they think you're difficult, and they love you, and up and down. And so everybody's career is like that. But if it's in your blood, you never stop making movies, even if you are not making them, because in your mind, you're constantly seeing life in the street and you keep shooting all the time.
Within this old house live two residents. One of them is John Russell, composer, professor. The other has been dead for over 70 years.
I always was very attracted kind of to I want to say, it's wrong to say the spiritual world, but about the other side. Is there something beyond us, besides us, above us? where do we go when we die, or what happens, and all that. I know that everybody, your creative mind drives you crazy about it. So I was very attracted to kind of, also having worked in horror movies, when I was a young assistant director at Hammer Horror, and working as an assistant director again with Peter Cushing and all those wonderful classical English, corny but totally classical horror world, which the entire world is copying it later on. And unfortunately, in my life, I had very lot of experiences with people who very close dying, like my brother, and my father, and of course my mother, and life, and everybody has that. But I was very affected by it, and then my memories about it and my fantasies about it and all that. So when I was desperate to work on as an assistant director on Robert Wise's The Haunting, years before, but I didn't get that job. But I was at MGM Studios shooting something else as an assistant when Mr. Wise was shooting, and I knew him. I got to know him. So I was on the set of his film, with that incredible spiral staircase going up, on one stage. And but every time I could escape from my stage to go and watch him direct, I was there. But anyhow, all that. So when I received this phone call out of the blue about The Changeling and would I read this script, I absolutely jumped at it. And when I read that script, I had the same feeling when I read Robert Wise's script of The Haunting. I was in the bedroom in the middle of the night. I was living in St. John's Wood at the time. And I was petrified. I couldn't move because I kept hearing noises and things. And the same thing happened when I read the Changeling script, And we had a dinner party, and I came downstairs when I finished the script, and they said, "Peter, are you all right?" My wife said, "They said, why?" He said, "You're absolutely white." And he said, "Yeah, but I've just read this incredible script, and I've got to get on the phone tomorrow morning. I've got to make this movie." And that was the Changeling, and I loved so much making that film. It was, again, a total dream world. And I flew immediately a week later to New York and met the producers. I said to them, they showed me the locations. And I said, I couldn't shoot this movie in this attic of what you picked because it's too small and I can't do it, And I said, if you can't make the movie like that. And so we had this meeting, and at midnight, I heard the rustling of an envelope come through the door. And it was a note from my producers saying, we listened to what you were saying, and we decided to raise another $1 million. I'm going to give you this incredible set, but you have to start shooting on time and start whatever. Anyhow, so that's what happened. And I loved making the film. I knew the Cray twins, of course, because when I worked with John Littlewood on Sparrows Can't Sing on the East End of London, Reggie and Ronnie and 7 of the other guys turned up on the first day of shooting, and they basically read the riot act on us. They put the protection racket on us. They came up to me. Reggie came up to me and he said, who gave you permission? I was the first assistant on Sparrows. Who gave you permission to shoot here in Angel Lane? And I said, the police. He said, oh, really? I said, yes. He says, well, nobody asked us. I said, what do you mean? I said, you could get into big trouble. I said, like what? Like getting killed? He said, you better come down to the Kentucky Club tonight and let's have a chat. So I went, but I took Joan with me. And there they said, you can't go around shooting around the East End. You got to have two, because you really could get into trouble. And you got to have two of our guys with us. Vince was Billy. I can't remember the other guy's name, who were with us through the whole shooting of Sparrows Can't Sing, through the 8 weeks. And they will protect you from any problems, you know. And but it will cost you. And that's how I met them. And then I got to know them. I didn't know they were really who they were, because nobody knew that those days except the police. And they owned clubs. They owned like a great number of clubs in the East End, working men clubs. And they had a lot of singers and blues singers, and Judy Garland became a friend of theirs. And all the world famous boxers from New York, when they came to London, they come to their clubs to rough it up in the Kentucky Club, which was their club. And because that was the thing to do, because they were legendary boxers at that very early age. And if they wouldn't have got into crime, they would have probably gone a long way. So that's how, so I knew about it, and I got the script, and before I read the script, I said, I don't think I want to do, because I knew them too well. I didn't know. You know, I've been to their clubs in the East End. I've been to their clubs in the West End. I went to their charity wrestling matches with everybody, with Barbara Windsor and Ronnie Fraser and Jimmy Booth and Victor Spinetti and I can't tell you, Joan Littlewood. We were all there together with the chief of the police, with the local priest, you know, with the mayor of Stepney. We were all there having this, raising money for charities, children's charities, you know. So that's what I knew. I said, I don't want to go into that and break the bottle, smash it in your face, and fights in the pubs, forget it. I read the script written by Philip Ridley, and I was blown away, because Philip wrote the movie about the women's perspective of the twins, and what happened, what was happening, and what they did and what they didn't do. And to their eye, to the mother, to Violet's eye, they have never done, my boys could never do anything bad. They were good boys, you know? And she didn't really know what was going on. And there was this rivalry between the East End and the West End, and the Richardson gang and the Craze gang and all that. And then the honor of them. And that's how all these killings have started. But they had never killed, well, I don't know, I'm not an authority on it, but they never touched women. They had a tremendous respect for women because of their mom. And it was only their own kind who they had murdered, you know, through some very, of course, and I read all the books, and I made the movie about them. I knew them, and I had seen little things here and there happening in the Kentucky Club when I was there. But we all know the stories of what was buried in the Hammersmith flyover and all that in the concrete and or whatever. I mean, there were wonderful books written about it, and I knew them, and I knew Charlie Cray, who was the third brother, who was in fact on the film as a technical advisor. And whatever money he was paid, he's given it away for charity. And he was very kind of helpful to try to keep and make the movie authentic. And I'm incredibly proud of the movie. And I think it's an incredible film, particularly because of Philip Ridley's script and because of the actors who were in it.
Derek William Bentley, you are 19 years of age. It is my duty to pass upon you the only sentence the law can pass for the crime of willful murder.
I mean, Let Him Have It I did because it went hand in hand with the craze. And when I read the script of Let Him Have It, I called up Jeremy Thomas, wherever, I don't know where he was, somewhere. And I said, Jeremy, I just read Let Him Have It. I've got to do this movie. And he said, we didn't think of you because you did the craze. And he said, it's very similar. I said, it is the same word, but I mean, that was grown-up violence. And this is child violence, you know, of Derek Bentley and Chris, you know, and I mean, Chris Eccleston playing Derek Bentley was wonderful. So again, by miracle, I did it. I did the film, and I'm so proud of those two movies because they go hand in hand, you know. And then, of course, Romeo's Bleeding, you know, and it's all just coincidences of how life throws you around. It's nothing intentional. Gary and I were trying to do J.P. Donleavy's Ginger Man as a film, and that's how we met years before and become friends. And I wasn't working at the time, and I was moaning and groaning, saying, I can't find a script, there isn't anybody who wants me, and all that. I can't get a movie going, I got to do something. And Gary said, look, an agent from CAA gave me this script on the plane. I've read it. Go and read Romeo's Bleeding. See if you can figure it out. And so that's what happened. I said to Gary, I said, you crazy? This is a great script written by Hilary Hankin, you know. We could make a great movie about it, you know. Long story short, we somehow did it.
Toast. Take two.
He loves those toasts, doesn't he?
She turned around. She pointed my own gun at me, Jack. You know, like some kind of an animal.
Just one last dance.
The film originally was going to be made by Harvey Weinstein. And Harvey lost the rights to it because it was owned by Working Title before he owned it. But Harvey jumped in and bought it. But then he lost an option on it, and Working Title got in. And I had a phone call from from Tim Bevin from London, from his car phone, saying we're desperately trying to get back Romeo's Bleeding. We should meet and talk about it all and all that. And that's what happened. So they got control of the rights. And Polygram was their releasing company. It was a sub-company, which actually started after, I think, we started shooting Romeo's Bleeding. I mean, Gary and I were desperate to work together because we really kind of loved each other, you know, and our crazy minds and whatever. It was a perfect vehicle for it, you know. And so we started making the movie, and we made the movie and had a very wonderful time making it and a very difficult time making it because we were shooting in New York, and seriously, a couple of streets away, sometimes at night shooting, you hear some gunshots and somebody was getting killed, and, you know, so it wasn't without any danger, you know, and I loved working with Gary. I loved working with all the actors in it, and New York, and to shoot New York is a dream of every director because you cannot set up a bad frame in New York. It's like it was built for that 185 or camera or whatever it is, you know. So I had a wonderful, wonderful dream time doing it. And I had this fantastic DP, and it was his first legitimate movie, Dariusz Wolski, who then since become one of the most important American DPs. And Ridley Scott doesn't make a movie without him, and he's a wonderful child, wonderful guy who I just loved, and a fantastic crew, and we had a fantastic time. and we did a fantastic movie. And then, of course, opinions and disagreements happens about the cut of the movie, and all kinds of fighting happens about it, you know. And then the release of the movie was released, but, you know, I really think it was released with the wrong campaign, which took months and months and months, and it wasn't as successful as it should have been, you know. And I remember hearing some interview with Eric and Tim, Tim Bevin and Eric Ferner, who still runs Working Title, which is probably the most important British company in the film business and in the world, you know, and they've become incredibly successful. But I heard Tim say in that interview that it was before our time, it was too soon, indicating that we may not have known what to do with it or how to handle it, you know, because I think the film is really a wonderful, wonderful film. And because of Gary's performance, because of Lena Olin's performance, and Annabella Sciorra's performance, it's again was a dream.
Honey, I'm home.
He walked around just like anybody. But inside, he wasn't like anybody.
The project came to me with Gary, and there was a period when Gary decided not to do the film because he wanted to go back and see his son Alfie in London. And at that time, I was urged to recast the movie. And I met Gabriel Byrne, who I love. I was thinking, you know, but I knew because I know Gary and I know each other. I knew Gary was going to come back. And I kept saying to my wonderful casting lady, he said, I am waiting for Gary. He is going to come back. And then one day I heard that Gary was asking questions about the casting lady who was doing another movie in New York. Has Peter cast the movie yet? And I called Gary up and I said, listen, make your fucking mind up, you know. And if you come back immediately, because otherwise I have to cast the movie and I don't want to make this film without you, you know. And then Gary came back and then we did the film. And then about Lena Olin, there was all kinds of opinions about Lena, not that she's not being right, but I should have somebody else. And I insisted, absolutely insisted, that we have to cast Lena in the film, you know. He said, there's nobody else who could do it like that. And so Lena was cast, and then about Annabella, oh, she's a dream. She's a dream, absolute dream. I adored her and will adore her forever. I mean, I'm not even mentioning Roy Scheider, who's been a lifelong friend. And Roy, Hilary Hankin, who wrote the script, had a dream to have a certain person cast in that Roy Scheider part, who represented the American mafia, you know. And I think she wanted Tony Curtis or something. And Tony was a friend as well. But it didn't happen. And at the 11th hour, I didn't cast that role. And I literally went and called Roy up from a coin phone and the phone cards didn't exist those days. And I didn't have enough change to call Roy up in his place in Connecticut. And so I put a coin and I made a reverse call to Roy. And I said, Roy, it's Peter here, you know. He said, how would I know who it is, you know? I said to him, I said, are you free next week and the week after? And he said, why? He said, because I'm doing Romeo's Bleeding with Gary Oldman, and I love you to play this mafioso part. you know, in the film. And he said to me this way, poor Roy is dead and he's been a lifelong friend. And he said to me, he said, well, send me the script, let me read the script. And I said, darling, there's no time, because the time the script gets to you, have to be here and start shooting, you know. Anyhow, I said, please come. I promise you will not regret it, you know. Anyhow, he came and did it. So that's how it was cast, the film. Yeah, the lady, the casting lady, who is legendary in New York, is Bonnie Tinnerman. And she has cast 90% of the great New York movies. So she was the expert, you know, at this type of films. And her assistance and suggestions and help and fulfilling my wishes when I said I need to meet so and so on. I kept a book of who I saw for Lena's role, you know, and they were the most wonderful actresses who become movie stars since, you know, and I still kept saying no, because I wanted Lena. I always work with the writers, including Philip Ridley, including the two wonderful boys who wrote Let Him Have It, and Hilary Hankin. I always spend a couple of weeks sitting down with them, and I said, read the script to me. And I make them read the script, and we stop at every scene, talk about it and this. And I said, well, this doesn't make sense because so-and-so, or whatever. So there were some minor changes, but Hilary's script was a very famous, unmade, great script in the film business. So not much of it has been changed. Some of it has been changed in the editing, you know, when against my wishes, it was changed into the Russian mafia, and Lena's name, Nina Markov, was changed to Lena Markov, so it sounds more Russian. And I mean, to me, it was the epitome of what was in the script was the epitome of the New York mafia, you know. And I think it was not the right decision to change it, but I didn't have any cutting rights in the film, and to change it into Mona Markov. And I mean, you can't even remember it today if you think back on the movie. It's immaterial.
Jesus, Jack. I'm sorry. You're under arrest.
I haven't watched the movie for a long time, actually. But it was lucky. The only unlucky part was the release of it, you know. And I was saying, you know, that I heard Tim Bevan saying that it was before our time. And maybe had it been a different time, you know, because I went genuinely into it of wanting to make, I mean, every time you go and film something, you want to make the greatest piece of film of all times. No director sets out to do the lesser of that, you know. And, you know, kind of, unfortunately, we ended up in disagreements about it. We delivered the best we could do for the satisfaction of my two producers, for my lovely writer, Hilary Hankin, and myself. And it is a communal effort, and particularly on a film like this, which wasn't an art movie, it was trying to be an art movie come a commercial movie, you know. And of course, I mean, I'm grateful for Tim and Eric, you know, for taking the movie and actually financing it, and also for Gramercy for actually distributing it, you know.
Is it hard yet, baby?
It ain't easy.
Yeah, I know.
Being with Gary, being with Lena, being with Annabella, and we all loved what we're doing, and with Roy Scheider, and we used to go and see dailies at the end of an exhausting day of shooting, when we had to wait for the screening room to empty, and people started drinking, a lot. Just those moments, and I mean, watching to see the films and the rushes, and to see it turning out better than what you thought you were shooting, even, And yes, there were some incredible moments, yeah. That whole shootout sequence between Gary and Lena at the end of the movie, the scenes, I mean, the scene when Gary says goodbye to his wife, to Annabella at Kennedy Airport. And it's just, never will forget until I die. Her waving just with her arms, saying, "I'll see you when I see you." Because he's saying to her, he said, "Run, and go, and I'm going to turn up once every 2 years at whatever this place, and I'll send you a message, whatever." And they don't know when they're going to see each other, because he has to go hiding or he's going to be killed. That bar, which was at a place called Salt and Sea in the desert, because I wanted to find a gas station and a bar and a railway line which goes on forever. And we were there towards the end of the shooting. Yes, because we came back from New York and everything, and we were in Los Angeles, and it was towards the end. And the sadness of knowing that you're going to end the film, and your love relationship with all your actors gonna kind of vanish into infinity, and shooting the end of the movie, when he walks out and it sinks in front of that pillar or something, and it's the last shot of the movie, kind of comes up, and whatever. So you're full of tremendous emotion, but I remember laughing our heads off at that time. Ironically enough, talking to Annabella the other day on the phone about it, of our wonderful memories of that film.